Well, hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner of the internet. My name's Angela, and I love to draw. I really do, and I make a living through drawing and creating art, but I also do it for sheer pleasure. And throughout the month of January, I'm taking part in the Fragments of Your Imagination challenge run by 7F5R Challenge Facebook group, which is 7 Forest 5 Rivers, 7F5R. Yes, that's what it is. And there's a group of 3 CZTs who run that particular studio. And I hope I find you well today. I hope you're doing okay. And I'd just like to say thank you for everybody who has watched my videos, who has returned, who has subscribed, who has left lovely comments. I appreciate all very, very much. And I'm glad that these particular videos with these variations on fragments are found helpful and useful and interesting for so many people. It's always nice to be able to provide that inspiration, I suppose. And my mind works in strange ways that I can take things and develop them quite happily and sometimes in bizarre ways. So thank you ever so much. I appreciate this. This is yesterday's page, and this was for fragment D23. And in Zentangle, a fragment is the basic unit of a repeating pattern, but it can be an item on its own. So you can draw it really big and use it as the skeleton of a design in which you place other patterns. Or you can join them together to create repeating patterns, either in a structured grid called a reticulum, or just as they happen to go together. The choice is entirely yours. But I've taken the idea of fragments and looking at one fragment a day and looking at how you can vary them. And I'm learning a lot about my thought processes as I do this, and the different ways that you can vary things. Sometimes they'll work with one shape and not another, or one particular style of fragment drawing and not another. But this one was particularly challenging in a way, in some ways, but I came up with some really surprisingly lovely variations that I really like. The first one that I love is this one here. Just reminds me so much like a nautilus shell. And now I've added some shading, and I used chalk pastels, the Carbothellos. Don't think you can see the writing on that. Yeah, Carbothellos from Stabilo. They are chalk pastels, so they blend like any other chalk pastel, but they also have some water-soluble dye particles in them, so that you can blend them in, but then activate those dye particles with water and spread that colour out, or alter the colour however you wish. So they're really an unusual tool to use, but a lovely one. And this full set of them has got some lovely colours in. So just in case you wanted to know, I've added the metallics with the iridescent mica pigments from Cosmic Shimmer, and also the copper ones, which I've got some copper ones here in Perfect Pearls. But there are many other brands that are similar. It's a powder and you can activate it with water, and some of them have got like a resin in them or some binder in them, so when you apply them they remain where they're supposed to be. In fact, I think they all do. I know the Cosmic Shimmer reactivates with water. I think the Perfect Pearls do, but once they dry, it's not easy to rub it off with your fingers. So this one I'm particularly fond of. The other one I'm fond of is when I did this filling in the gaps, which is this one here, and it reminds me of a wire wrapped sort of big disc bead. The ones that are big, round, and they got a hole drilled in the middle, and like it's been wire wrapped or wrapped with thread in some way. I really like that one. And this is just done by leaving segments without this repeating pattern around them, so it is a variation. It's actually a variation on well as well, but here I've made the outside edge a little bumpier just by thickening the lines and adding that there. But I think if I was going to do that in a drawing, I'd actually draw the circle in first and then add those. I draw the circle in first in pencil and then ink everything in, so that I can change the shape of these a bit easier to get them like they're overlapping. But yeah, so you may see something like that today, you may not. So I haven't added shadow to all of them because it's a sketchbook page and I add them where I think it'd be value. This one is fun. This is the one where I put like S shapes in there. But if you pick out a highlight, it really gives a really interesting sense of volume. It feels that we've got a peak where this is and the other parts really dip away from it. And that's the illusions that lines can give you. So that is all a lot of fun. So I shall pop that to one side because we do have a new fragment for today. And this one is called DreamDex. And it was deconstructed, created by Debbie New, who is one of the three who run the 7F5R. 7F5R? Yes, 7 Forests 5 Rivers studio. So it is basically, it's a triangular shape. You start with a triangle in its original form. And then you have these almost S shapes. The tail of the S shape is round here, I suppose, but you just draw half of the, the S, the loop there, and repeat it on the other sides. And this really is one that it creates a beautiful shape in the middle of it. It reminds me very much of early Celtic art, our Tene culture, and so on, which I particularly love. So do so many other people. This gives, even as a triangle, with this basic form, you'll see me draw this quite often. This one, can you see I've just stopped a little bit short of the edge, and that was an accident. I meant to go all the way up, but I'm obviously still having problems with hand-eye coordination in the mornings. But that's a subtle variant. It's kind of like here, but it's a subtle variant. And I think there are ways of varying this. I'm going to go back to this one. The simplest way, I think, is to add an aura inside and then just colour it in. And I'm going to have to be careful because there's a lot of ink on this paper and it does take a while to dry. I'm using a fountain pen again. And my extra fine nib Twisby arrived yesterday and it is very much finer, which makes me very happy. Show you. So this is the line from, this is the fine one. We just pop the lid back on. This one is purple. And the other one is quite a howling pink. I didn't expect it to be quite this pink. But you can see it's quite a bit finer, noticeably so. More so when I give the nib a quick clean after I'd used it last time. There. So it's quite a bit noticeably finer, which makes me very happy. So this the second variation, third one along, I've just filled the middle part, auraed it and filled it with black, and that gives a nice contrast, leaving those open. But of course you can just combine the variants. And I love the shape this gives when you don't take this curve right to the end. I have to say that. So if we combine these two, There's a lot more contrast in the design. Which is quite nice. Let's have a look. Let's do another. And yes, I am working with my paper sideways, essentially because the camera is portrait, and my paper I often work on not portraits, landscape formats. Now with that one, I don't know if you can see, but instead of having a very gentle curve back, almost like it comes straight down, here I've curved it back on itself, and so I've really got teardrop shapes going on there rather than half an S shape, I suppose. And that exaggerates this shape in the middle. It really does. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, it's one of my favourite kinds of shapes. Again, I'll pop that in there, but this time I'm going to pop a single orb in the middle of it. Single bead. And that is lovely. I think I would just aura this. I was going to reach then. You might have seen me go to put my pen down. For the finer ones do that, but I've just done it like, you know, with this. And I think I will fill these little bits with orbs. It'd be a lot easier with a finer pen, but the fuss and daddle of capping and uncapping would take up a lot of time on the video. If I was drawing this myself, I wouldn't have a problem with it. So there's another one. Okay, this pattern certainly needs these shapes to be circulating inside in a you know, in a particular direction. You can't, I don't think you couldn't reverse them or have them meeting up next to each other. Well, I suppose you could if you only want to do two instead of two of the sides instead of three. So that gives quite an interesting variation. It's created in a similar way, but instead of having all three sides with the S shape, I suppose you could put a hump there, but I quite like this as it is. It almost reminds me of a moth wing, or shapes that sometimes moths have. I think you could almost put a body in there, a moth or a beetle, which is an interesting idea. So that, I think, could be another variation, and you've got plenty of space here to fill with patterns or colour or, you know, an aura. I think I'll do another one of those because I want to leave that one as it is, as the first of its kind. And what I'm trying to do is guess where the centre line of this is, so I know where I can join these. Now we'll just pop this in. And then let's have a look and see if we can add an aura or two, and perhaps even that's there. So that makes it an interesting shape to work with. Who'd have thought, eh? Just move it that way, because hopefully you saw what I was doing. I think you do, because I do move it closer to me to draw. So from that to that, and that is the only way I can think of changing how these rotate around the shape, as it were. Okay, the next row down, I'm going to do them like this. Now, this is quite a curved shape, but I'm sure we could do this with a more angular shape. So I'm going to go up and then down. The corner, a long way up and down like that. Oops, that one's a bit more curved than the others, but you get a more angular structured kind of shape here. So that central shape won't be quite as curvy, it'll be more pointy, which has its charm as well, I'm sure. Could work to be a nice contrast in a design where there's lots of curves, another way of getting contrast in. So another way of filling in this space. I think you could fill this space in without the aura. So let's give that a go. And I'm going to do these very much going and filling the corners, as you can see, with some spillover of my lines. So I'm sure we could put these here. And in crescent moon fashion, perhaps, just aura around. And we end up with that area in the middle. So that's another variation. And I think with this one I'd rather like to pop. There's something about doing these auras in side shapes or round shapes which just helps to separate the different parts of pattern, in my mind, that helps it to make a bit more sense. That's why I like to aura that inside. It's the same kind of thing, but it looks different because of where the aura is. Here I've put the aura on the the outside of these curves, and here I've put it on the inside of these curves. I think that may make sense. I say I think it might. Okay, so what about a different shape? Okay, so it's half of an S shape. Stop before you hit this, and then another curve there. So I'll do it again. So it's like a leaf, or half a leaf. So that gives a different kind of pattern here and in the middle. And I am just going to aura these, but I am going to very quickly do one that isn't auraed. I was looking at this, and like with every single fragment, I look at it and I think, oh, there's not a lot I can do with this one, is there? And then when I do it, you go, oh yeah, there's an awful lot more I can do. So I think I shouldn't doubt myself on that. So there's those leaf shapes, and instead of auraing inside those leaf shapes, I'm going to aura in the centre. And yep, we get an interesting shape, but that's fine. Other shapes using this idea. How else could I alter that S shape? Well, instead of making it an S shape, how about making it with a spiral on the end? Again, I'm not going right up to the line. I'm giving some space between the spiral and the side it would butt up against, I suppose. And that's very Celtic-y, isn't it? That's very early Celtic kind of stuff. It is. Trust me on this. I've long loved early Celtic, and there's actually a lot of the influence of early Celtic art, Tene art, in Anglo Saxon manuscripts. The Anglo Saxon times was the time between, in the UK, was the time between the end of the Roman Empire and 1066, when William the Conqueror came over and invaded Britain, and the Norman conquest, as it was called, and everything sort of changed from then on, as it were, different management. Okay, so if I can do one of those, perhaps I can add another one in there and another one. Oh, I like that. So I'm adding a spiral there. Then I'm going from this top line to add another spiral, and then another one. So not from the bottom, but from the top line, so that the spiral's going the same direction. So that's an interesting variation, just with the pattern that's added within these shapes. And I will just add a little bit of ink in those corners there, and the bottom where these spirals meet the bottom, just to give it a feeling that they're the shape themselves. So that's really sweet. I like that. Oh yes, I do. Okay, so what else can we do? This is the furled pattern that we've already had somewhere, I think. But instead of having these points in the middle, I'm going to try to move them towards the edge. So again, we get this feeling of this spinning inside, or twirling around inside. And you can add these here. Very first shape, I didn't quite get it far enough along, but it would work. So that's a different version. So instead of this going smoothly up and over, so a smooth up and down, instead of curving it this way, I've chosen a point and it's created a V shape instead of that smooth, sort of like half teardrop shape almost. So again, with these, let me have a look here. If I take this one, I am going to pop these like this, so there's just half and half, as it were, and that creates a very interesting shape in the middle here. And I am going to aura the outside. So that's an interesting one. And if I take the simple spirals, so if I take one and spiral it round like that, I can take this one and spiral that one around like that. And again, we've got this space here that you can do something with, whether we aura triangle, which is quite nice, an idea, pop a bead in, do anything you like there. That actually is really quite sweet. I think so. This one, it's a bit strange, but I do like it. There's possibility in this. And of course with these ones, this is a kind of shape or motif I use quite a lot, so I'm able to draw it quickly. And again, it's these little furls. You see this in medieval architecture, windows in Gothic architecture and others, these kinds of shapes. Often it's more circular at the top, but you're not going to get that circularity in a triangle. But it's that kind of shape. It reminds me of windows, and you can enhance that feeling by creating almost like, you know, the what would be stonework, the frames, the stone frames around the glass, as it were. So these are all possibilities, and I'm just thinking of how, if there's any other shapes that I can think of we could use. I think the other big variation perhaps is how far down you create these, or how much straight line you leave before you start creating the little teardrops. So there's that one, but there is also, if we go so we practically start these shapes and really join them together at the points. So it's from almost one extreme to another, or somewhere in between. As you know, I've said I like to stop these shapes with some space before the point. I think it gives a really interesting shape in between them. This is interesting, but I find this more so. So there we are. So lots of triangles. Let me see if I can come up with one more variation to fill, or two, is it? To fill these gaps in. I think this one is pretty much like that leaf, the leaf one, but I'm using, well, it looks like a lip shape, doesn't it? That really should be a bit further along, but those are possibilities as well. Let's just do it again. So there we are. Again, that gives an interesting pattern in there, shape in there. Okie dokes. What about other shapes? Well, it'll work in any other shape. My head is thinking a circle might have the biggest possibility for some other variations. So in a square it would work, and this is an interesting shape in the middle as well. It is, and I'm sure that square would work for all of these. This kind of one would work. See how to stop and think how that would work on here. So that does work as well, if that is something that tickles your fancy to work with. And here you would, if you put these side by side, these squares, put another square next door and repeat this. Well, it's more of a rectangle, but you would form heart shapes. So it would make a pattern of repeated heart shapes. which would be quite fun and interesting. And yeah, I didn't pop them exactly next door to each other, but close enough, so that would be an interesting variant. And of course, you know, there's all kinds of things you could do here. The simplest thing would be just to create an inner aura like that, and then fill it with pattern or colour or anything else you wish to pop in there. So whatever you can do in a triangle, you can definitely do in a square. And the other thing with the square is, because we haven't got an odd number, we've got an even number of sides. That means we can add these opposite each other. It's particularly clunky because I haven't thought this out, but it is a variant. And side by side, if we mirror this, then, and I think this would work better with that space that's left, so these can join neatly at the corner. So you'd get this shape. If we kept them the same shape side by side, is it? Oh, right, yeah. You'd get an interesting kind of shape that doesn't really match up, so I wouldn't do that. I would mirror and rotate them. You could make it match up, I'm sure. It would involve drawing the shape pretty centrally along the sides, which is also a possibility with the triangles. So instead of starting at the corners, you start a little bit out and make these distances equidistant all around the triangle. So that's another possibility as well. And with squares, if you didn't want to rotate, if you just wanted to repeat the pattern the same, then this one, hang on, yeah, oh, if you wanted to rotate it, that's right. Because mirroring is okay, it's the rotation that's the difficult thing. And then you'd get these interesting sort of pill shapes almost, which is fun. But of course every other shape would work in here, even in a more rectangular shape. So those leaf shapes work. And there was, what was the other one? All the spirals. Gotta love spirally ones. So the spirals would work for sure as well. Whether it's one spiral or you fill that in. So that's another possibility, which is fun. Okay, other shapes. Let's try a circle, because this is one where I think there may be sort of like latitude for variation in more ways. So I've just put dots at the quarter points just to help me spread these out nice and equally. So let's go around. So I am going from each dot and starting at the corner and just going around. So that works nicely. Yeah, takes a bit more planning. It is a question of putting just those dots in as guides. But of course, that's 4 dots. We could also work on a triangular feeling. Again, this is very Celtic-y, La Tene. That's really lovely. The 3s work really nice. The 4s are lovely, but they've got that bit of structure about them. In gardens, gardeners will often put plants in groups of odd numbers, because for some reason our minds prefer odd numbers, whereas if we've got even numbers like 4, our minds try to sort them out into a regular arrangement or pattern, whereas with odd numbers it's not quite so easy to do so. So often like 3s would be quite nice, as I'm sure, oops, come here, let's have a look, and let's do an arrangement of 5. One's a bit bigger than the other. But that's interesting. We've got like a starfish shape in the middle. So that's ripe of possibilities yet again. And the other thing that we can do with a circle that perhaps you couldn't do with the other shapes because they've got definite sides, is to have 2 of them, and we get this kind of ball shape. And with this, with equal numbers, particularly with this one, it's going to be just move that around. I'm going to fill that in just to cover up my crime there. And so we can oppose them and get a completely different shape, which is quite fun. Could do that with squares, but it's this kind of idea we end up with, I think. And you get the very linear shape there. This is much more curvy and more interesting. Indeed, if I do this one again, fill that in, then we could do repeats like so and keep going, depending on how big you've made the circle. So there's that possibility to repeat them in this way, and we most probably could do that with these. Most probably, I'm thinking, most probably could. Yeah, you most probably could. Yeah, it's possible to do them, but it would really be just auraing these lines more than anything else. Here you can distinctly get those other shapes in. Okay, circles, loads of possibilities, and I haven't thought that. What about seed shapes? Well, with a seed shape, the most obvious thing is to have them opposing, which is lovely. Opposing each other. Let's try them going in the same direction. And I'm betting that if we're careful, I pop dots there. That's a bit of an odd shape one there, but you get the idea. I didn't go down and up, you know, it's just a straight curve instead of a slightly S-shaped one. So in that seed shape, that's an interesting kind of arrangement. And of course you could do them opposed from this way into the center of the sides. Which will give that shape. Or from the centers to the points. So slightly different feel for each, so those are possible as well. And just pop an aura or two in, or 4. So the auras really do help to bring these shapes out, I think. That one's a really interesting one. This is just sublime. There are Tene constructions without any kind of compass or anything else. This one is interesting. So I like the whirly star in the middle. These are very much like that, but much more rounded. Okie dokes, any other shapes? Let's go for a kite shape. And I'll just do these around. So it's just a pulled out square really. So anything that you can do in a square, you can do in a kite shape. Parallelogram is going to be the same kind of thing. It's just a shape, a square that's been really manipulated. So it would work in there. Interesting shape, the way that's been squeezed and squashed. I think the last thing I'm going to do is just a random kind of shape. How are we going to do that? With great difficulty, she says. But I think it is just approaching this as the best that you can. And just put those shapes in. Actually, it works in a very interestingly crazy, warped, twisted kind of way, but it's still quite pleasant. That has surprised me. With this one, it is just trusting your intuition as to how you put those curved lines in, those S-shaped lines in. Any other? Well, these will work for the tops of, like crystal-y things, these ones that we've seen recently. You're going to get some very odd shaped bits there, but this kind of idea. So the crystal or the more organic versions where you twist and turn these. So that would work quite nicely. But I really think it's looking at how you can embellish these areas here and also the inner area. This one has really got to be my favourite. I'm particularly fond of this one. This one works nicely. I think that's another fragment actually on its own. It's funny how we go from one thing to another and we end up with, they all, as I've said before, everything overlaps, and eventually you do enough variations, you find you get some that have already been done and others that haven't. Okay, is there anything else? I think I just want to try. with the square. It's short, long, short, long. So it's having these almost, they're not regular rectangular shapes. But that works, that offset cross. The other thing for a square so I've put those shapes in, but we've got these very blocky areas on either side, but it creates that interesting kind of S shape in the middle if we aura it. It's not easy to do with a square. I was thinking about that. I also like these ones where we just have them coming from the side. They make an interesting variant. That's as far as I want to go with them, to be honest. I think there's a gracious plenty there, and my mind needs some time just to tick over, I think, some of the variants. About the clangs and crashes, you can hear me putting pens down, glasses off, and so on. So that was an interesting one. The other thing is, you might have noticed that I'm working just on plain white paper. There's a reason for this, because I wanted to see how the ink works on plain paper, and I want to see how this would react with distress ink if I put it over the top, sort of. Because I find the distress ink, I know the distress ink changes the paper, the absorbency of the paper, and not just absorbency, but how the ink spreads in the paper. So I just wanted to see, and also how, what do you call it? Robust the surface of the paper is, how, because I've noticed my pen is picking up from the distress inked ones lots of fibre that it doesn't seem to do from ones that aren't. So and that causes the line to become thicker then, because I've got all this fluff in there that spreads it out. But yeah, so I wanted to have a look at that, so that's part of the reason. And also because I've been doing a lot of drawing on plain paper. Would you like to see? I'll show you quickly. 2 ticks while I adjust my camera. There we are, camera mostly adjusted. It's about the best I can do to get these in. So this is one that I started drawing, I don't know, beginning of the week, when my other pen came, so it would have been Tuesday, or Monday, Tuesday this week. It's now Friday. I finished it yesterday, and I have got here some of the fragments from early on in the week and variations of them. Ones perhaps I didn't put onto my sketchbook because my mind ticks over them, and other patterns that have come in from looking at medieval manuscripts, particularly the leaves and flowers that you can see in here, and some old favourites. You know, well, that is an old favourite as well, and well was one of the variations this week. This was a fun one. This is Morisot, but with Zach as the big section, you know, the bigger parts of it and joined together. So that was an interesting idea, is to take fragments and create Morisot with them. So that's one I've done. And you can see the all the different fragments there. There's some triangular ones as well, here and here. I can't remember what those were. There's poke leaf. But others that are, you know, this is from medieval manuscripts, this frilliness. This is one of the fragments from this week. That's where those little, you know, this idea is like this, except we've shifted them towards the corner, so not having them centrally placed, so you get that movement in the middle. So I like that. So there's that one. And then the other one, this is one I'm working on at the moment. I think I've finished it because I've signed it, but I'm not sure because I've got these big open spaces and part of me wants to fill them in, because this is typically me. There is some white space in there, but it's incredibly busy. And then there's this one, which has got quite a lot of open space. But I haven't decided whether I want to fill that in. I have got an error here, so I do need to correct my little error. I'll use white gel pen there, no doubt, just to cover up. I've got the overlapping lines wrong. I drew them in, and oh God, don't ask. I think I need to do something here because this just looks that little bit busy on its own. That does. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So these aren't the only things. I really do need to pay attention now to getting the coloured templates for adorable dogs finished as well. So I'm just going to say thank you for joining me. I hope that you have enjoyed taking a look at my work this week, and that you are going to be inspired by it and have a go at drawing some things for yourselves. And if you've enjoyed the video, thumbs up would be appreciated. A subscription would be very appreciated. And yeah, thank you. Just thank you. Look after yourselves and take time to be creative. Take care for now. Bye-bye. Bye.